No, wait a minute. What do you mean we're doomed? And why are we doomed? In what sense? I would like to explore the idea of, are we going down the drain? Is there a future for America? And can a man like Donald J. Trump, if elected, could even he reverse this sinking Titanic of a nation?
First, once again, Donald J. Trump's whole purpose is to divide the Republican vote. Anything other than that is useless. If you think really this man with no experience with foreign policy or any political platform can get in office and become the president, and this country is going to be greater, you're crazy.
Well, Barack Hussein Obama was our president. He didn't have any presidential. He had political experience for a couple of months in the Senate, I think, before he changed ship and started campaigning.
When I go to the gas pump now, when I go to the gas pump now, I'm paying $1.40 for a gallon of gas.
Really? And what are you driving? A set of Nike sneakers? I mean, the last I heard,
a Denali, Yukon Denali. 2007, yeah. It takes a lot of gas, but guess what? It's easy on the pocket now.
Well, what is your point? Mr. Payne, Mr. Payne, Mr. Jackson said that the United States of America is doomed no matter what. Would you concur with that statement?
He's the one who's stating.
No. It's in trouble. It's not doomed yet.
Some optimism finally. Thank God Almighty. I'm starting to get depressed here. We lost 20,000 viewers in this last segment. Please continue.
Like I said before, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, and that means the people have got to get more involved with the politics of the nation. They've got to get not politics. I shouldn't say politics. They got to get involved with what these politicians are trying to do. They have to question them. That is their deal, to question everything that they do. That is their right.
Wait a minute. I disagree. I'm tired of questions, and I'm tired of fake answers. What we need is a revolution in this country. I'm not calling for a revolution, but if it happened, I would hope that the revolution is that these guys that are in power should be thrown out of power, because all this talking and debating is getting us further and further down the line to doomsday. I mean, look at the Europeans.
We have elections to take them out of power.
Elections, they were taken out of power by the Tea Party, and the ones that were put in were worse than the ones they threw out. What we have now is a country that seems to be spiraling out of control along the lines of what's happening in socialist Europe. Now,
you serve 4 years to go home. That's the deal.
I'm sorry, repeat that?
That's the way this is set up. Not as perpetual dictatorship.
I'm sorry. Are you advocating for a perpetual dictatorship?
I'll read you something else here. The people are the masters of the Congress and the courts, not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men that would pervert it.
Such as our current president? Would you say that our current president, Mr. Barack Hussein Obama, is perverting our constitutional rights? Or at least trying?
Yes, he is.
Give me an example.
Yes, he is.
Give me an example.
Well, nobody wants to do anything. Nobody wants to do anything about it because they all want to be politically correct. That political correctness is not a word. What it is, if you read between the lines, it's communism.
Exactly.
If you read it, you've got to read the Communist Manifesto to understand what's going on. Liberalism. Now, let's take liberalism. Liberalism is the new Bolsheviks. They're going to win because they want what these other people want. But what happened to the Bolsheviks?
The Bolsheviks were taken over by the communists.
The commies eliminated them.
Right.
And that's what they're going to do over here.
So they were the useful idiots. They were the useful idiots. Somebody once said that if you want to think about what's the difference between communism, fascism, and capitalism, you got to think of two cows. If you're a communist, basically, and you have two cows, if you're the communist state will take both of your cows and give you the communist. What you have is the difference between a communist, a socialist, and a capitalist. If you have two cows, a fascist will take both of your cows and kill you. A communist will take both of your cows and give you milk, along with a socialist. But a capitalist will sell two cows.
Benjamin Franklin
said that.
Let me tell you something. Benjamin Franklin said it best. He said, "Those who give up their liberty for security will get needed."
Well, we gave up our liberty a long time ago, especially with the establishment of the Transportation Security Administration, and that was under a Republican watch, under George G.W. Bush, the second.
Wow! Would you just admit that on air? Whoa.
I'm sorry. Is this the NSA beaming in?
It's true. It's true.
I mean, we gave up our liberties.
He's not the only one at fault. All these people, Democrat, Republican. Do you know that 100 years ago we had 12 viable parties in this country?
How many?
And today what do we have? We only have 2 parties. And that's it.
I'm sorry. Did you just give me some information I was not privy to? There were 12 political parties in the old days? How
we
old?
had 12 viable parties 100 years ago.
So you're talking about like the Know-Nothings and the Whigs?
Today we only have 2 parties.
Okay, so it weaseled itself down to the Democrats and the Republicans. And a lot of people don't understand that the Republican Party was exactly the party that was all for the Emancipation Proclamation. It was a Republican Party that was a party of President Abraham Lincoln.
Whoa, wait a minute, hold on. The Emancipation Proclamation came out of the Civil War.
Right.
What happened in the Civil War? A lot of people don't understand the Civil War. The Civil War, first of all, was the rich guys in the North that created the abolitionists to agitate in the South. They want to horn in on the multi-billion-dollar cotton industry. Slavery wasn't the problem. That's why we had a Civil War.
Well, it was a big part of the problem.
And that's why they started calling about states' rights, and they're calling about this rights, that rights. And this is the problem you have.
So what you're, Mr. Payne, what you're saying is that you're talking about the mechanics and the politics behind the Civil War, which necessarily wasn't motivated by altruism or the Emancipation Proclamation. It was more or less motivated by greedy rich guys on both sides, north and south of the Mason-Dixon line.
What happened in World War II? Japan was moving into the southeast. They were moving into Southeast Asia.
In Indonesia.
They were moving into New Guinea, and they were doing all these things to have the Japanese Empire. And we created embargo against them. We insulted them. Number one, we insulted them in the World War I conference. Number two, they built up their services. And number three, they started doing. They started working their empire so they could have the goods and services. But they had to do it violently.
You know, it's interesting you bring up Japan.
The United States embargoed, and that's why we had a war. Now, China's doing the exact same thing that the Japanese are doing.
Right, and I think Japan is shaking in its boots right now because of the fact that the Chinese have a bone to pick with them over Nanking in 1938 when they invaded the former capital city.
Go away.
Right, so I think Japan is going to be absorbed into an expansionist China if China does decide to go military.
It will not. It will not.
And why are we going to go to their defense?
I'm sorry?
Are we going to go to their defense if China decides to take over the disputed areas between the straits of Japan and the Chinese mainland?
It's going to be a tough call. We don't know yet.
Are we going to send our Sixth Fleet over there if they go into Taiwan?
No, I don't know. They're building up their own fleet right now.
I know, and they're also developing aircraft carriers and ballistic missiles for their submarines, which they already have. I like the Chinese people. I meet a lot of them in my other universe, in my other occupation as a mainstream journalist. But I meet a lot of Chinese people. They're very diligent. They're very interesting to speak with.
There's nothing wrong with. I'm telling you, there's nothing wrong with the Chinese.
And
people.
there is a civilization that's
There's nothing wrong with the Japanese people. What it comes down to is resources.
That's why Japan went on the warpath in 1941.
That's been the problem with wars ever since.
That's why Japan went on the warpath in 1941 because President Roosevelt did that oil embargo on them. They didn't have any potential for fuel.
It was scrap steel.
Steel as well.
Oil.
Yeah, steel and oil. But I'm not saying what the Japanese people did in attacking Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941 at 7:55 in the morning on a Sunday morning was a good thing.
They were warned by Yamamoto.
Yeah, and what was it that Admiral Yamamoto said about the sleeping giant?
He told he had 6 months of victory, and that's it.
And he said, I'm afraid we've awoken the sleeping giant.
He totally advised them not to go to war with the United States, but he threw himself in with the lot when they attacked Japan.
Well, the emperor was a figurehead during that time. He didn't have power over the military.
He was a figurehead.
Huh?
He was a figurehead.
Right. The emperor probably himself didn't have a real good understanding. I'm not sure if they even
the thing that brought them to war, like MacArthur said, the things that brought them to war was the militarists and the industrialists that brought Japan to war in World War II.
What they used it.
MacArthur was great. They loved MacArthur because he dismantled that. He disbanded that whole operation.
You're talking about post-World War II?
Yeah.
You're jumping around a little bit here. I'm trying to talk about the emperor and the fact he was a figurehead, as well as the fact that the military was in charge of Japan and actually made the decision to attack the United States, despite the fact that Admiral Yamamoto, who was actually educated at Harvard University, am I right? He actually lived in the United States, and he was very familiar with the United States' industrial capability, which was largely untapped at the time, especially since we had a third-rate or fourth or fifth-rate military at the time. We had a very tiny Navy. Most of it was in the Pacific at Pearl Harbor.
Well, that's because
we had no Air Force.
The World War I deal that Woodrow Wilson screwed up.
Yeah, he
Woodrow
sure did.
Wilson should have never been a president. He should have stayed at Princeton because that's the guy who created your 1040 form. Because prior to that, we were taxing at the register, and that's what we got to get back to.
Well, you're talking about nowadays a value-added tax and being taxed up the wazoo with a page of some 800,000 pages of tax code. But, we're talking about an intellectual like Barack Hussein Obama, President Barack Hussein Obama, educated at Harvard, and apparently he didn't pay much attention to his lessons. But he's certainly not at Harvard anyway, because he didn't appear to learn anything about history or about common sense even, Mr. Payne.
No, this is what happens at school today. People are not interested in history. They're interested in money. And when you're more interested in your pocketbook, this country's doomed. Now, you got to go, your listeners have got to go read the letters of the Sons of Liberty and Jim Otis. Go read them. It's on the internet.
Well, I wanted to make a point about Woodrow Wilson. He was an intellectual from Princeton who became president of the United States. I wanted to talk about Barack Hussein Obama, who was an intellectual who went to Harvard. He became president of the United States after serving a short stint in the United States Senate. He was a community activist. Then I want to talk about the current presidential candidate who hails from Canada, and his name is Mr. Ted Cruz. He's a Canadian. He was a Canadian citizen up until a few months ago. I'm not sure he can even run for president at this point in time, being a former Canadian citizen born in Canada. He's an intellectual. He went over here to Harvard University, and then from Harvard he went straight down to Texas to become a senator. These are very ambitious people, which is why I don't trust Mr. Ted Cruz. Not only that, like Mr. Donald J. Trump said, and rightly so, and many intellectuals and legal scholars agree with him, he may not be eligible to run for president because he was not born in the United States of America, despite the fact of his parents. And so that's up in the air, and certainly the Democrats could throw that against him and derail the entire nomination process. So why take a chance?
Well, I'm going to put it to you in special terms. When you build a building, you have an architect build up blueprints, right?
Well, Donald Trump actually completed a 90-story building over here.
Wait.
I'm sorry, I digress.
You have a building. You have an architect draw up plans, and you build a building following those plans, correct?
Well, I've never actually constructed a building.
Well, it doesn't matter. That's the philosophy behind it. The thing is that we have the blueprint. The founding fathers gave us the blueprint, and we have misconstrued the blueprint, and we cannot build a building anymore.
No, the building was constructed. The Constitution is like the Bible, the good book, the Rock of Ages. The Constitution is unchanging. It is not a living and breathing Constitution like the leftists want you to believe. Why? Because if it's become a living, breathing Constitution, then that means they could change it to mean whatever they want it to mean. The Constitution says what it says, and it's a solid foundation of our nation. And you start toying with that, we're going to have some serious problems.
It's just like kids. You take 10 kids, put them in a line, tell the kids the secret on one side, it comes out different on the other side. It's the same thing that's going over here.
What is that called? Round robin?
Oh, telephone.
Oh, telephone. Was that Jack?
These guys they're children. That's what they are.
Mr. Jackson.
None of them have read. None of them have understood Machiavelli.
Mr. Jackson, Machiavelli, what's that? And the Prince. Machiavelli said, "We got the power. We're going to strangle them." And the Prince said, Machiavelli wrote the Prince. Am I right?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he said he wrote the Prince, and he said, "Look, I'm the Prince, and you do as you're told." Like I'm going to tell Mr. Jackson.
No. What he did was he said absolute power corrupts absolutely in a sense.
Well, who was? Do you remember the ancient Greek philosopher Plato? And he wrote his great dialogues. Great dialogues.
Yeah, he said.
Do you remember?
He said only the dead have seen the end of war.
Only the dead have seen the end of war. Can I ask you a quick question? Do you remember when Thrasymachus was asked whether might makes right in philosophy? In Great Dialogues of Plato. Well, I digress. Might makes right. In other words, the Prince. In other words, what you do, what you're told, but it doesn't necessarily make it ethical or virtuous.
If you have you're misconstruing, because what happens is that Machiavelli, he said that a prince that is benevolent toward his people, is loved by his people, has nothing to worry about conspiracies. A prince that is not treating his people well has a lot to do of worrying about conspiracies.
Well, obviously, he never heard of Gaius Caligula from ancient Rome, the great Caesar of Rome, Gaius Caligula, known as Caligula. Caligula said, "Let them hate me as long as they fear me, and if only all Rome had but one neck." And he wanted to kill so many, he wanted them all to have one neck, so he would snap them all.
When you have everybody fearing you, sooner or later that dissipates.
Sure, and he only lasted a few years.
It's like throwing a pebble in the water. What comes out? What becomes calm first? the outer sides become weighty, the inner side becomes calm. So similarly, everything changes. Nothing's
it's like not seeing the wolf and having a wolf.
If you read Bishop Fulton Gay-Sheen's books, he said, "You think communism changed anything? Nothing changed when the communists took over from the Tsar. Nothing changed. They just changed aristocracies. That's all."
Mr. Jackson, can I actually? I would like to get your viewpoint on the discussion right now as it relates to ancient antiquity. That would be Greek and classical philosophy, and as well as some of the great Caesars, some of which you sometimes, I'm told, try to emulate with your Denali and Range Rovers that you have.
Yeah, no, Caesar, no, anything Italian, European, I try to stay away from it.
Why is that? Well, that means you're going to have to live in a cave somewhere, because anything, from Western civilization is what you're using.
You have to understand my mindset, bro, and that is I can't wait till your man's getting office, so when all hell breaks loose, I could be the guy who pillages.
Wait a minute.
That's what I want to do.
Wait a minute, Mr. Jackson. What makes you...
I'm not going to Mexico. I'm not going to Canada. I'm going to sit here and enjoy the spoils of confusion, because that's what's going to happen.
I don't
There's going to be so much money flying away. I'm telling you, watch.
All right, Mr. Jackson, I would like to ask you a serious, direct, pointed question, because I'm interested in your opinion.
I was serious.
Mr. Jackson, do you think Donald Trump has a chance to become the next president of the United States of America?
Not at all. Not at all. That's all. Now, come on. Why wasn't he? That wasn't Donald Trump's decision not to be into that debate.
Whose was it?
Because I don't know if it was you. I think it was Mr. Payne. You know what I'm saying? That the people that judges or pays attention to politics, right? The Iowa caucus. That's what some people are known for. You don't know Iowa for a great NFL team. You don't know Iowa for a great place to have a wedding reception. No, Iowa's known for the caucus. Other than that,
well, it's known for Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise, because I think, as it was said, he was born in Iowa. And tomatoes,
potatoes.
You have to be a real
Trekkie to know that. So you just gave me some new information. Who knew?
Well, now you know. That's why people tune in their droves to the Lionel Mandrake radio show.
Okay, so now what's more important, Captain Kirk or the Iowa caucus?
I think Captain Kirk, because I think that those other guys have as much a chance of winning. I think Trump is going to be the next Republican nominee, and if he runs against the Hildebeest, Hillary Clinton, who's she should really be wearing striped outfits right now with a ball and chain at her ankle, because she's a criminal, brother. You know that.
It's not even guaranteed she's going to get the Democratic knock, but it's definitely not guaranteed that Trump is going to get it.
Well, there's a third scenario.
The only thing with the Republicans is they don't want Hillary in there. So you're going to put this slapstick comedian up against Hillary, he's going to lose.
Mr. Jackson, slow it down. Cool your burners. Cool your burners.
At some point, the American public is going to get a grip and be like, you know what? Okay, he served his purpose. We had a real ha-ha during debates and campaigning. Now it's going to come down to brass tacks. Who do we really want in office? The only person we got is Donald Trump or Hillary. I'm sorry, I don't see Trump being up there.
Mr. Jackson, I just want to say one thing. All of us may have been overlooking a certain glaring aspect here, that there are two nominees on the Democratic side, because as we well know, there are no Democrats that they could have really ran that stood any chance of being elected, except for Hillary Clinton. The Democratic establishment, the Democratic Corporation of America, decided they were going to try their old guard, tried and true, war horse. And they're going to trot her out, and hopefully people will, the name recognition and the fact she's a woman and the fact she speaks like she's lecturing 3-year-olds might appeal to a lot of leftist liberals out there, of which I'm not saying you're one, but you could be maybe one. And but let's look at the third case scenario, Mr. Jackson. They know that there's never going to be a socialist president of the United States of America. So the old crazy old grandpa, Mr. Goober, what's his name, Mr. Sanders, Colonel Sanders?
Bernie Sanders.
Bernie Sanders, feel the burn, man. He's not going to be nominated. However, we may say that it could be Hillary. But if Hillary gets indicted by the FBI, and I'm not talking about the female body inspector squad that her husband, Bill Clinton, might have on staff. I'm talking about the Federal Bureau of Investigation is going after her. If she is brought down by the FBI during this process, they're going to have to trot out vice president. Well, you know who the vice president is, don't you?
No, I that's a good question. Who would be the vice
Oh
president?
my God! Can you help me out here, Mr. Payne? Let him know, please. Educate.
Sure. He's got. Well, like I said, he has a terrific. All he has to do is be wise enough to get people in cabinet. I would suggest, and I wouldn't put it past them.
I mean, they might bring out Joe
Ben
Biden. They might bring out Joe Biden as a
intelligent
backup.
guy.
They're going to have to bring out Joe Biden as a backup if Hillary gets perp walked, down the
You know
aisle.
what? He would have been. You know what? And I'm glad you said that. I'm glad because the obvious choice for the Democrats should have been Joe Biden. But why? Why didn't he?
Because Grandpa Joe, they felt that he wasn't really, he wasn't really juiced up enough. They felt that Hillary Clinton, with the whole idea that she's a woman. Is she a woman or is she like? Because I saw her hands; they're kind of like gnarly. She's a woman, or I don't know what she is.
I don't know.
She's
I
a
don't know what kind
monster.
of woman doesn't get mad over her husband making meets in office. But I don't
Give
know.
me a break. She enabled her husband. She denied the fact that her husband was accused of serial rapes all over the place. And there are a lot of people like Jennifer Flowers and others who have said that he actually physically manhandled them and had his way, which, according to our great President Barack Hussein Obama, any man that does something to a woman, either like Bill Cosby did by drugging them or forcing themselves on them, is a rapist. So I wouldn't put it past Billy Bob Clinton. I don't know if he was. I'm not saying he was, but it is out there that he may have been. Because his nose is so big and red, it tells me that he's drinking a lot lately because he's guilty of something.
Can I interrupt and say something
Please.
about human beings?
Go ahead, Mr. Payne.
Okay, thank you. See, human beings are very uncanny. When they're enslaved, they want to be free. And when they're free, they want to be enslaved.
It's crazy. And like we're free now and we want to be enslaved by a socialist, quasi-socialist ideology that will turn into fascism sooner or later.
Human beings are.
It's like that great song by Bruce Springsteen. A poor man wants to be rich and a rich man wants to be king and a king wants to rule everything. I mean, you're right. It's like you always want to be something else. But it seems like I saw a young girl yesterday at the undisclosed location above us, and she was walking with a Feel the Burn button on her backpack. So I naturally made a nasty comment behind her, just loud enough so she could hear it by saying, man, people really want to be enslaved. They want to be enslaved to socialism, man. Socialism has done nothing but brought more misery and dehumanization around the world to millions and millions of people and has been responsible for the death of more than 100 million people worldwide. Now, there's no such a thing as like Grandpa Uncle Crazy Joe Biden or, let us say, Mr. Colonel Sanders, the presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders. I'm a democratic socialist. I'm a democratic socialist. Excuse me, the terms are mutually exclusive. You can't be a Democrat and a socialist at the same time. That's called a bamboozler. I'm telling you that you're free, but in George Orwellian newspeak, you're my flunky and you're my slave because you're not free. And this is not a democratic process. One or the other is mutually exclusive.
All you have to do
Who's going to sign the bill that's going to pass the laws on marijuana reform? That's who I want in office. How about that?
Well, that would have to be Bernie Sanders.
That's a good one. Look, let me tell you something. Can I tell you something about marijuana?
Yeah, please do.
No, you don't have. You can't tell him anything, Mr. Jackson, anything he doesn't already know.
Okay, you don't know that.
This is how stupid it is. First of all, we have drunk drivers, right?
Yes.
You compound the problem by having legalized marijuana. So now what happens is that you double the drunk driving problem. Third, you bring up all these people from NAFTA that have all these trucks that are coming into the United States from above the border, and they don't have the qualities that the American truckers have. Now
Right, the brakes don't work and everything else. I understand that.
That's right. You triple the problem, and then when your family gets wiped out, go cry to the court.
Wait a minute. Now we have a governor of the state of New York. I'm not in New York right now. We're in an undisclosed location beneath 35 feet of reinforced concrete above me. But if I were in New York State right now, I would say that isn't there a governor named son of Spachim Cuomo who actually went out there and said, hey, listen, we're going to try and legalize marijuana. But guess how they legalize it? They create dispensaries so people who are jonesing for weed don't have to go out and buy it, on street corners on the Lower East Side in places like Delancey Street or Essex Street. Am I right, Mr. Jackson? No comment.
I wouldn't know nothing about it.
Come on. You know what you're doing. And then all of a sudden you have dispensaries, so the door has been creaked open just a little bit. And the next thing you know, they're going to start to say, well, it has medicinal purposes. It should be illegal. And it should be rescinded and everything else, and it should be made legal. That's how you kick the door in and you change everything.
Excuse me. You know what bothers me? I heard you and Mr. Payne talking about the national deficit and all this, that, and the third. Once they tax marijuana, do you know how much money this country is going to see?
I don't care how much money. You want to dope up your population and make them less productive so that you could tax them? Look what's happened to Scandinavia because of drugs.
I've never heard of anybody driving while high.
That's because they do it all the time. Driving while high because you can't be. It's not illegal. They haven't defined. That would be under the influence, probably. That's DUI, driving under the influence of either pills or marijuana. But now they have to create a test in order to determine if you are high on the marijuana.
How do you prove that?
You prove it by you take them to a room and you waterboard them until they confess, and that's how you prove it. You get a confession.
I want to ask your man there. I want to ask him a question.
Mr. Jack,
do you remember when the Air Force caught some people inside the silos? These are officers inside the silos.
Yes.
Smoking marijuana.
I
Would
remember
you want that kind of guy to protect your country?
Yes, Mr. Jackson. Do you want?
I wouldn't mind. I'd rather him than the drug guy.
You want stoners operating Minuteman II nuclear missiles that they caught in the silos of Kansas?
They're doing it now. They're doing it now.
I know, but it doesn't make it right. We need better quality of people. We need people with principles and values. We can't just put somebody in a fire suit and say that they're a fireman.
Guy who was smoking weed.
All right, I want to get off this topic here. I want excuse me, gentlemen. I want to refocus. Let me ask the questions here on the Lionel Mandrake radio program. At the time now is 3:46 until we actually have to get on our way. So we have a good 3 to 4 minutes left to talk. I want to make one comment. Last night, there was a presidential debate, which I, Lionel Mandrake, boycotted. I didn't watch it. Why? Because Trump wasn't there, and I didn't want to give my viewership to Fox News. Does anyone here realize that 50% of Fox News Network, which I used to have respect for, is owned by Ali Walid, who is a Saudi sheikh? He owns 50% of the Fox News Network. And what does that tell you? Fox is wholly owned by a foreign interest who may not be so friendly to our own national interests. But that's not what I wanted to mention. This woman, Megyn Kelly, she got up there, she insulted Trump, she phrased her question in such a derogatory and insulting way. Her very first question on the come out, this was 4 months ago during the debate, which got Trump very angry at her. And I thought it was extremely unfair. Megyn Kelly's not a journalist. She went to school in Albany. She has a Juris Doctor degree in law from Albany. She's no more a journalist than I'm a journalist, even though I'd like to think of myself as a commentator. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a trained journalist. She's out there touting herself, and Bill O'Reilly, the no spin guy, is out there saying, yeah, Megyn Kelly's a journalist, one of our best. But to me, in order to be a journalist or to be a Navy SEAL or to be a professor, you have to be trained. Not necessarily, but to be a bona fide journalist, to work for the New York Slimes or the Washington Compost, what you have to do is go to school and have a journalism degree. She doesn't have a journalism degree, last I heard, and yet everyone's calling her a journalist. You know what Fox News calls her? Talent. She's talent because they know they can't actually really pawn her off as a journalist. I think Donald Trump should be aware of that. She's not a journalist. She's ideologically driven. Last night she was on TV saying, oh, the elephant's not in the room. She had eyelashes like butterfly wings. Did you see the size of her eyelashes? I caught a glimpse of it. I had to turn it off because just to look at her. But the idea of a debate is not to be about the talent. It's to be about the people debating, and that would be the candidates. And Fox News is really trying so hard to muck it up that I'm beginning to think that Fox News is not as conservative, with the exception of Mr. O'Reilly, and which I don't even think he's a real conservative. He's not a purist that Mr. Levine thinks he is. Or Mr. Levine never said he was, but he's not any more a purist than any of the other commentators. Or Mr. Sean Hannity, who happens to be, I think, a lot more balanced and a lot more, I think, on point. But that's all I wanted to say. This is a debacle. I'm glad Trump stuck to his guns. And can you believe that they were actually, listen to my viewers out there. They're already, I see some emails coming in already on the monitor. Look at that. A lot of the viewers have contacted me. I want to say one thing. The viewers have contacted me and said that Donald Trump, there were some of these so-called intellectuals from Harvard who were debating who were talking about, oh, I'm on the phone saying, talking to a talk show host, Donald Trump, he's going to show up at the last minute. It goes to show you that if they couldn't even tell that Donald J. Trump was not going to show up to that debate come hell or high water, or no matter how much shameful begging O'Reilly did, it was never going to happen. And these people actually had a question about it in their mind. It goes to show you these are stupid people. Well, to my loyal... We have the, I'm sorry, Okay, guys, I'm sorry, but we're coming to the end credits now. I would like to thank my two guests on the Lionel Mandrake radio program. That would be Kason Jackson, somewhere below the Mason-Dixon line in the American Southwest. And that would also be Mr. Thomas Payne. He's an extraordinarily well-versed person with a lot of very interesting ideas, somewhere in an undisclosed location on the American Northwest Pacific Rim, somewhere out there on the Lionel Mandrake Show. I'd like to thank you guys. Thank you again, gentlemen, for the wonderful debate. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. And remember...